I'm John Goekler. I'm in from Santa Fe, where I recently retired as the director of the Gibb Singleton Museum, Gibb being one of the bronze artists out here, managing a gallery there and so on. And fell into the art business by accident a few years ago, and it became a fascination and a refuge, and now I wander around talking about it because it just knocks my socks off. So I want to talk a little bit about collecting. Now, pretty much I think the only time we hear about collecting art is when you read the New York Times and it says, a Gauguin just went through for $300 million, and you say, a Giacometti just brought 130, a Picasso 180. What's going on? And bidding against Russian oligarchs and Chinese tycoons, how am I possibly going to collect art? I mean, it doesn't even seem possible. So I want to suggest that it is not only possible, it is maybe one of the most rewarding things that you can do. And there are things that you need to know, that collectors know, that allow them to build great collections. Not necessarily with a lot of money, not necessarily competing against the oligarchs. So Gibb Singleton, whose bronze I hope you'll spend some time with out here, used to say that making art is what makes us human beings. He'd say, you know, the anthropologists, the archaeologists, they got it wrong. They say, oh, it's when we started using language, or oh, it's when we started hunting in groups, or it's when we captured fire. Gibb said, no. It was the first time somebody sat down intentionally and said, I am going to make something beautiful. He believed that making art and collecting art was part of being human. It was the foundation of the human experience. And if we look at the archaeological record, we find out that's true. One of the latest digs is the Blombos Cave in South Africa, dated 100,000 years ago now, and they have found complete artist kits. They have found the pigments, they have found the grinding stones to mix them, they have found the bone spatulas they used to apply them, and shell cups that held the paint. 100,000 years ago. Neanderthals, you know, they got a bad rap, right? They were actually intelligent human beings. They decorated themselves with feathers and with paint, and they did geometric designs on cave walls 50,000 years ago. Think about our more immediate ancestors, Cro-Magnon. They did Venus figures, they did pictographs, they did cave paintings, they engraved on bone and on ivory 45,000 years ago. Art was fundamental to being a human being. And then along came civilization. A lot of people have that response. Two things happened when civilization arrived. And of course, we remember the art of civilizations, right? Think of, everybody knows Sumerian art, Egyptian art, Mesoamerican art, and so on. Amazing stuff. But two things happened at that point. One is that everybody went from being artists to only artists produced art. We all used to make it, and suddenly it became a specialty, it became a field. And the other thing that happened was, instead of everybody owning art, the rich guys owned art. So we talk about inequity today. It's nothing like it was 5,000 years ago or even 500 years ago. Art, for most of human civilization's history, has hung in cathedrals, it's hung in great halls, it's hung in castles. Common person, if they had art, might have had a homemade crucifix, homemade prayer wheel, maybe a found object they put on a family altar, something like that. So, for a long time, for what we think of as formal art history, it belonged to the priests and the kings and the pharaohs. Then the Industrial Revolution came along, and all of a sudden prosperity extended through much of the population of the world. Now, a couple of months ago, YouGov, which is an online polling outfit, asked their focus group, how many of you guys own art? 42% of them said, yes, we own art. 4% weren't sure, which is kind of confusing to me. Now you would expect who to own the art? Over 65 graybeards? Yeah. But over 40% of the 19 to 30-year-olds and the 31 to 40-year-olds also own art. That's never happened before in modern civilized times. So something is going on there. That's one of the big things that's happened, is that art has come back to the people. By the way, it's an estimated 4.4 million people make art in America now, which is pretty exciting in itself. So when we talk about that, one of the other things that came out of it, the other end of the poll was, they said, tell us your perception of the art world. What they said was, 47% said art is expensive. 22% said the art world is elitist. And 77% said art is inaccessible. So how can 42% of America own art and say art is inaccessible? And the answer is because of the way the art market works. And let me define something here. The way the fine art market works, okay? So fine art is an art form that's practiced for the beauty of the art. Art for art's sake, you might say. As opposed to commercial art, where the goal is to sell you something, as opposed to applied art, where it's to design something cool, something usable. So this is something that we want to just say, wow. Now the boundaries are getting kind of squishy. Digital art is moving into the fine art world and so on. But basically we're talking about paintings, drawings, sculptures, so on. Now, two segments of the fine art market. Primary art market means original works that are getting sold for the first time. So when you walk into a gallery, when you see a lot of the work on the wall here, that's the primary art market. The secondary art market, they're reselling. So when you read in the New York Times that Christie's had a $450 million auction night, that's the secondary market. Now, when you talk about that one, which is a fascinating market, if you've been tracking that, every year we're astounded. It's like it can't keep going, it can't keep going, and it keeps going. In the secondary art market, the way they look at it, they say, first of all, they're old masters. Okay? What an old master means is you were born before 1760. So none of you guys have a chance. The old masters last year were 6% of the auction market. Now, that's kind of a skewed number, and the reason is that most of them are now held by museums or old families. But when one does go through, it tends to bring so much money that it brings the numbers up on the whole. Second part is 19th century. So that's born between 1760 and 1860. 12% of the market this past year. There's your Turner, Corot, the Impressionists, so on. Then you get into one that's really interesting, modern art, born between 1860 and 1920, 43% of the market last year. Big shift going on there. So that's Picasso, that's Braque, that's Giacometti, right? The ones that are bringing those record numbers now are in that art group. Then you have post-war, born between 1920 and 45. That's about 25%. So when you look at Freud and Warhol and so on, that's that group. And finally, you get into what we call contemporary artists. That's born after 45, and there's Basquiat and Banksy and Christopher Wool and so on. So that market is right now, when we talk about primary, that's who that market is. It's almost all contemporary with a few of the post-war artists left still contributing. So that, in a lot of ways, is the most affordable market because new works are still being produced. Now, where are they buying art? Centers have always been London and Paris and New York, right? Last year, 37%, over 37%, went through China. First time ever. America's down to 32%. The UK's down to not quite 19%. France is about a little over 3%. Everybody else makes up the other 8.5%. That's never happened before. So there's a huge geographic shift that's going on, okay? There's also a structural shift that's going on because half of the primary art in America last year was sold online or at fairs. Yeah, so as a gallerist, I say, we need to think about that because those are the trends, those are the hard numbers. Now, here's what we don't want to talk about. A lot of those big transactions that went through, according to the FBI and international criminal investigation organizations like Interpol and so on, were transfers of money for the purpose of money laundering, buying arms, buying drugs, and so on. What's happening is a, quote, private collector sells a piece of art that's sitting in what they call a free port, a bonded warehouse where it was never taxed. They're in Geneva, they're in Hong Kong, and so on, and sold to another private collection. We don't know who they are, we don't know where the art is, we don't know where it went. All we know is hundreds of millions of dollars changed hands. It has replaced racehorses as the #1 means of laundering money. There's another aspect that's kind of scary. Bloomberg had a great article 4 or 5 months ago, and they said if Wall Street worked like the art market, we'd all be in jail. Right? Why would you say such a thing? Well, one of the realities is that you'll have manipulation of the prices. You'll see a minimum put on a piece at auction. That creates a false floor. That may not be what the market is, but they've created the market by putting that number out there. You'll also suddenly see an artist that's been selling for $5,000 for years go through for $100,000. Were they discovered? Probably not. Probably what happened was that their dealer sent a shill in and did that and bid the prices up. And that sounds shocking until Paul Zuger reminded me the other day that Rembrandt was known, Rembrandt having been bankrupt and a scofflaw much of his life, was known for the 100 guilder etching. He would, because he always needed money, send his friends around and have them bid up his etchings when they went through to 100 guilders. So that manipulation's been running around for 400 plus years. And there's another thing. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen this. If you haven't, I really recommend it. It's online. It takes about 16 minutes, something like that. There's a 60 minutes piece on Wolfgang Beltracchi, German forger. Amazing forger. In fact, Steve Martin owned one of his pieces, and it was a Max Ernst, and they gave him the chance to get his money back, and he said, "Are you kidding? It's the best Max Ernst ever done." Brilliant guy. He got caught because they sent one of the pieces to a lab and they found a titanium white that didn't exist in 1935 when the piece was allegedly painted. And they asked Beltracchi, by the way, do you have any regrets? He said, yeah, I would not use the titanium white. What was really interesting was they interviewed the head of the lab that busted him, that outed him. And they said, how many of the pieces that you see are counterfeits? And he said, oh, 98%. Now, obviously that number's a little skewed because suspect pieces are sent to him, right? But still, 98%, that's beyond shocking. So it's gotten to the point now because of that, and because the forgers are so good. I mean, this guy did this for years and he fooled the best of the experts around the world. It's gotten to the point now that increasingly art historians will not do a catalog raisonné. Because if I put in the wrong piece, I get sued. If I leave out a right piece, I get sued. Why would I even want to do that? So, everybody scared off now? You done with the art market? All right, don't be, because here's the good news about it. You don't have to bid against the oligarchs. You don't have to hire this lab for tens of thousands of dollars and so on. Here's what you do if you want to build a great art collection. First of all, understand the purpose, right? The why is always more important than the how. Why? Because it touches your heart, because you love it, because it adds meaning to your life. That's why you collect art. Not because you think you're going to flip it in 5 years, because you want to get up every morning and you want to walk out and look at that and say, yeah, that's what I came for. So if we do want to do these things though, what do you want to do? First of all, you got to know what you like. Now, I can't explain this, but I can walk into a museum and out of the corner of my eye see a piece move on the wall. How many of you guys experienced that? I see people nodding. Yeah. For me, a Cézanne, if I walk into a room, there it is. I don't know, I can't explain that. I was at the Tate Modern a couple years ago, walked into a room full of Braque, and it was just like sensory overload. It almost knocked me down. So figure out what you like. And what is it? Look at a given picture and say, is it the scene? Is it the time period it represents? Is it the palette? Is it the geometry? Is it because it's big? Is it because it's small? It doesn't matter what it is. It resonates with you. What is it that resonates with you? And that's what you want to be collecting. Does it tell a story, right? And do you find that story comprehensible? Do you find it touches your heart? Does it reach you? And here's another one nobody talks about again. Does it creep you out? We did a show in Memphis last fall. We took several of Gibbs' big Stations of the Cross, life-size Stations of the Cross. And I hired a crew of local kids to set the show, to unload the trucks and set the show. And the kid who was kind of the leader of them, probably 25, he's got jeans, leather, tats, piercings, cigarette, right? We brought in one of the pieces, which is Be Forsaken. It's his 11th station, where Jesus is being nailed to the cross. It's a powerful piece. There's a small set there you want to take a look at. Kid, we pulled the blankets off, and the kid went, whoa, creepy. Went back to the truck. Every time he walked by that piece, he stopped and looked at it. We had a break, and he came over and he said, what's that thing about, man? And we talked about it and Gibbs' belief about the Stations of the Cross, why he did them that way, and so on. And that evening, we had the show set, and he brought his girlfriend back. And the next day, he brought his friends back and was showing them the piece and through the rest of the collection, and he had become the curator at that point. When we loaded the piece back into the truck, now he's not a buyer at all, it's a $150,000 bronze, right? He's not going to buy this and take it home. When we loaded it back into the truck, we blanketed it, we strapped it in. Before he walked out, he patted it twice, smiled, never saw him again. That's the power of a piece of art. And that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about when we say, what should I collect? The stuff that gives you that response. If it creeps you out, doesn't mean you want to collect it, but it means you want to spend some time with it. Because what an artist is asking you for is your attention, right? And if something hits you that strong, there's something going on there. So, third thing, educate yourself. This is such a fun process. Learn everything about the art and the artist that you can, right? And we have a lot of artists here tonight. I really encourage you to talk to them. They're amazing people. I can't even begin to describe some of the things that they do. But when you learn about them, when you understand what they're about, and you understand the uniqueness of their art, which is an important thing, right? It's not like everybody else's. When you look at one of those Renzos out there, after that, you can walk into any gallery, any museum, anywhere in the world, and you'll say, that's a Renzo. It's like that. Gibbs Singleton is the same way. You'll find that. When an artist has that kind of signature, that's power. And that's the kind of thing that you think about. So join local art museums. Thank you guys for being here tonight. I know Mark and his crew are working hard to take this place to the next level. And being members helps a lot. And coming to events where you meet artists and other collectors and so on helps a lot. Because they can say, wow, you know who I'm collecting? I just found this artist who. And there you are. So that's a great connection. If it's a local artist, see if you can do a studio visit. It is so fascinating to watch artists work, to talk to them about their work, to understand what they're doing, right? And a lot of times you may see work that hasn't even hit the street yet, and you get the first shot at it. And you can also ask them, who are they looking at? Who's your favorite artist? And they'll tell you. I mean, you know, every artist I know will tell me their lineage and how they love these different artists. I mean, where would Peggy Guggenheim have been had Duchamp not said, let me be your tutor. Let me introduce you to these guys. These guys, Brock and Picasso and Ernst, and, you know, I mean, amazing. And who knows when you're going to meet someone just like that in the course of doing that. So all of those things are really good. You also want to find out about an artist's education. Are they classically trained? What does that do for you? The main thing it lets you know is, first of all, they're going to have technique. They're going to have chops, right? Guaranteed. And secondly, they know the rules so they can break them. Classical, you know, don't ever do this. Some of the best stuff you'll ever see, they did exactly that. I have one friend who is, you know, got her MFA, went to Italy, did an apprenticeship and so on. And she said, you know what, the biggest thing it did for me was it made me stop having to think. I no longer say, oh, what do I mix to get that hue? It's automatic. And that means you're painting from the flow, you're painting from the zone. You don't have to stop and think. And classical education will help you with that tremendously. So an artist with a classical education, that's a pretty good indicator they got chops. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. Basquiat, resume is tagger, t-shirt artist, junkie, Madonna's boyfriend. Current price, about 50 mil for the good stuff. So, education's not everything, but it's really important. Now, something else we don't talk about. Let me sneak a business term in here. When you're collecting, have a strategic vision. What is it that you want? Where is it you're going? What story are you trying to tell? And some of the people who can help you a lot with that, when you know what you like, are curators. And most of them, are, if they're not setting for a show, love to talk to you and tell you because they know how to tell a story visually. That's what they do. And they can help you do that. And really, that's what you want your collection to do, right? So spend some time with those guys. Here's another big one. Start slow. Now, as a guy who worked in a gallery, I hate to hear myself say that, but there's no rule that says you have to take something home. It's way okay to walk out empty-handed. Learn, become comfortable, buy small pieces if that's what it starts, play with it. I have a friend who bought a whole series of 7x5s, right? And what he does is he set the wall with them, and then he rearranges them all the time, so it's a different painting every day. It's probably a quarter of what the same size piece for the wall would have cost him in a single piece. So small pieces, one great way to go. And here's another one. And when we talk about forgery issues and so on, Document everything. Document, document, document. And you say, well, there aren't any. Wrong. Keep the receipt. Ask the gallery for a certificate of authenticity or the artist. How many of you guys got a cell phone? How many of them are smartphones? Take a photo of the piece hanging on the wall. Take a photo of the artist standing with the piece. Shoot a video of an interview with the artist. Record it, upload it. You're creating documentation. If you lend it to someone, create a little sheet that says, you know, this piece purchased on this date from this artist, from this gallery, whatever you can add to it at that point. On loan, Northern Nevada Museum of Fine Art, Southern Nevada Museum of Fine Art, excuse me. Right? When it comes back, return to the collection. When it goes out again, and what will happen when the time comes and you want to be able to say, this is the provenance of my collection, is you'll be able to show where every piece went, where it came from, and so on. And that can be extremely valuable. Do you want to know what the big piece on Beltracchi's hook, his hook was for the experts? He took his wife, dressed her in period costume, and photographed her in sepia toner with the piece on the wall, the forgery on the wall. Experts love photographs because, oh my God, here it was in 1937. Well, that must prove it's real. No, he faked the photograph too. But when you take a photograph, it's dated, it's timed, and so on, and now we can prove that. Okay, so think about all of those things. You can do all of those things. Here's another one we often overlook. When you go to a great restaurant, the chef doesn't just throw the food on the plate, right? I don't care if it's 3-star Michelin. Presentation. Presentation a lot of times can be as important as provenance. So put aside a certain amount of your budget for lighting, for pedestals, for framing, for those things that really pop. I bought a piece one time and I couldn't wait to get it home, and I got it home and I stuck it on the wall in front of a yellow fluorescent. I was like, ugh. Go buy another track light, right? So consider that's just part of the deal. I have a new bronze coming and I have to get a pedestal. Paul, we got to talk about that. Build the buzz, okay? We live in an era where visibility is also value building. I don't know if you've seen the thing going on in the art world now about the naked selfies. There is a European woman who does, with phone cameras, shoots herself nude all over, in front of the Louvre and so on. Poses with people, gets photographed with people, and so on. Her career has completely exploded. Couldn't sell a piece before. And all of a sudden, there it is. So you can take that smartphone, which by the way has more computing power than everything NASA had combined when we put a man on the moon, right there. You can shoot a video, you can upload it, you can edit it, right there. And you may become the greatest promoter of your artist. Because they may not have an atelier, they may not have an estate or a foundation. A lot of artists don't know how to promote themselves at all. And you may be able to add value to them and your collection by doing that promotion for them. Here's another one. I'll keep my voice down when I say this. Ignore the experts. Okay? Critics especially. So anybody remember a guy named Vincent, funny ear, Van Gogh? Yeah, that was the guy. So Van Gogh, in anybody's top 10 list of artists of all time, Van Gogh is going to be there, right? Van Gogh made a little over 2,000 pictures in his lifetime. He sold one. Maybe. Actually, now we're discovering it might have been a gift or paying off a debt. Oh, okay. Well, let's see, who else? Surely the guys at the Met would know, right? The Met and the National Gallery in DC both turned down Caravaggio's St. John in the Wilderness. Excuse me? The Barnes Museum in Philadelphia, he got the majority of his Impressionist collection from Gustave Caillebott's collection, which had been turned down by the government of France twice for free. Ignore the experts. Oh, and one other, my personal favorite. Is it better if an artist doesn't make many pieces, like Vermeer, there may be 34 we've authenticated? Not necessarily. Guinness Book of World Records, most prolific artist in history, a guy named Picasso. 13,500 paintings, 100,000 prints, and a half. 13,500 paintings. How do you even do that, right? 34,000 book illustrations, 300 some odd sculptures, At one time, you could buy an original Picasso oil at Sears Roebuck from their catalog for 800 bucks. And the experts said, this guy is never going to have any value. Oh, would that have been his Le Femme d'Alger that just went through for $179 million? If you like it, if it talks to you, buy it. Never mind those guys. And here's another one. I hate to say this one too. Plan for the future. None of us is going to get out of here alive. Our collections are going to outlive us. So we need to think about that in an intentional way. What do we do about that? My little brother, I just acquired a new bronze that I've been coveting. And my little brother, through the Big Brother program, has been with me for 24 years now, and has started collecting art in his own right from hanging out in the gallery and with the artists. I said, what are you going to do with it? I said, I'm going to put it someplace I see every day because I love it. I'm going to look for places that I can lend it where other people can see it and love it, and I'm going to give it to you someday. That's what my collection is about. I want to share it with the people I love. So I'll close with a little story of a young guy who used to work for us. He was our tech in the museum. He's an artist. His wife is an artist. They were high school sweethearts. They got married like right out of high school, graduated, got married. So 2 artists out of high school, you know they're broke, right? They see a painting. They're out someplace at an opening. They see a painting, and they love it. And she especially loves it. But it's all the money in the world. He said it was $1,000 or $1,500. So here are 2 kids, you know, starting out, trying to create a household and so on. $1,000 or $1,500 is impossible. Well, he picked up a couple of side jobs as a tech. He sold some stuff. He bought the painting. And he said, you know, now every morning I get up, I walk out into the living room, I see that piece on the wall, and I just smile. He said, because I love the piece, but what I really love is that I was able to give it to the woman I love. That's why you collect art. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thanks for supporting the museum.